Biden's so-called Summit of the Americas is completely falling apart. This summit is a gathering of countries in the Americas where regional issues are discussed. The purpose of these meetings is allegedly to build more unity and cooperation, but this year's host, the United States, has made it clear that cooperation is completely off the table. Before the meeting even began, the US announced that Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua would be barred from participating in the summit, essentially turning the summit into a political weapon to isolate countries the US doesn't like. This decision has backfired, however, as Mexico, Bolivia, Guatemala, Honduras, and all 14 countries of the Caribbean have now said they're boycotting the summit, many of these countries specifically citing the exclusion of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. The Biden administration immediately went into damage control mode, announcing that it was lifting monetary and travel restrictions on Cuba, oil sanctions on Venezuela, and then sent a team of diplomats to Mexico to try to convince the Mexican president to soften his position on boycotting the summit. Ironically, the US had been promoting the summit as a way of increasing diverse forms of participation and strengthening democracy. While the hypocrisy here is mind-boggling, this isn't exactly out of character for the US either. It's more or less been US policy to overthrow democratically elected governments in Latin America since the late 19th century. Here's a list of all the US-backed coups and military interventions in Latin America. In other words, the legacy of the United States in Latin America isn't a legacy of democracy. It's a legacy of tyranny. It's a legacy of bloodshed. It's a legacy of democratic governments being overthrown, dictators being installed, and millions of people being massacred just so a few CEOs could grind out a little extra profit. On top of that, what's the state of the US's own democracy? Well, we have a democracy in name. Regardless of who's in power, the rich and powerful always seem to come out on top. As most Americans get pushed closer and closer to total financial ruin, the politicians shovel more and more money into the military-industrial complex, all while telling us there's not enough money for universal healthcare or education. While it lectures the rest of the world on free speech, the United States unleashes riot cops on its own people for protesting for basic human rights. This is why a group of activists is organizing a counter-summit called the People's Summit, a summit dedicated to assessing the state of the Americas from the perspective of ordinary working people. The People's Summit is going to take place on June 8th, 9th, and 10th in Los Angeles, and they've got a pretty impressive lineup of speakers and musicians, all kinds of organizations ranging from labor unions to tenant associations to anti-war groups are going, and admission is free. So if you and your friends are trying to meet new activists and collaborate with different social movements, this is your chance. These two summits present a pretty clear choice for everyone in this hemisphere. Either we continue to live under an empire that considers all of Latin America its backyard, or we tell that empire it has no right to dictate the way we live, and the best thing it can do for Latin America is to go back home.